Hello and welcome to this Forth Valley and West Lothian supported study resource for Higher Modern Studies, which today will focus on the question paper. My name is Miss Freeland. I'm a Modern Studies teacher at a school in Clackmannanshire, and I'm also an SQA marker, and I've put together a short video for you to share some hints and tips, but also some good practice for moving forward and maximising your potential in Higher Modern Studies. The purpose of this video today is to review some of the key skills that will help you develop your knowledge and confidence in approaching essay style questions, which make up a huge chunk of the Higher Modern Studies paper. You will gain practice in how to structure your responses that will then enable you to maximise your potential marks or maintain your marks. Our success criteria is that for each section of the higher course that you study, we will look at how to structure our responses, and you will use the videos to help organise your notes so that you're able to complete a timed response for one of the topics that you study and a question of your choice. Throughout the lesson, you will see these various symbols which will give an indication on what you should do, whether it is a task, whether you should pause the video, or whether you should listen to the instructions. At any point, you can feel free to go back and play the narration again and then attempt the task. So before we get started, although we don't have an SQA external exam this year, it is important to remember that in order to prepare your provisional grade for the alternative certificate model, we are being asked to sample some of your evidence from across the course. That means we need to have a spread of evidence that takes in the political section, the social section, and the international section. There must also be a spread of 12 and 20 mark responses so that that meets the demand of what would have been in the exam if we'd gone ahead. So we are looking to practice your skills within the question paper. There are 3 sections. Which section you will do will depend on your school. For political issues, you might study democracy in Scotland, or you might do democracy in the UK. For social issues, you might be looking at social inequality or crime and law. And for international issues, you might be looking at world powers or world issues. It's really important that as we go through, you access the question for the topic that you study. If you access the wrong topic and put the information down for the topic that you study, you will not get the marks, and the SQA are quite tight on that. So just be really careful and look at the top to make sure that you're answering the questions for the sections you have studied. The other thing is to make sure that you only answer the requested number of questions. Make sure that you follow the instructions and the rubric of the paper. If you write more responses than what you're asked to do, it won't actually gain you any marks. The marker will mark both sections, but they'll only award the marks to the section that got the highest number. And all of these things can also eat into your timing if you're putting a timer on. So before we move forward into the sections and we start to look at some specific top tips for each section, some useful advice for across the paper. In general, try not to use first person, I think. In my opinion, we are dealing with a formal structure, so try to use alternatives. This shows, in conclusion, it appears, it seems, it can be concluded. We're trying to make sure that we are not imposing our own judgment and working with the content. Modern Studies is all about examples, and we are looking for you to mention up-to-date examples that are relevant. That doesn't mean to say that you have to have the absolute latest up-to-date example. It is an example that is relevant to the context of the point that you are making. Try to make sure that we are getting the figures within the ballpark. Again, we're not expecting you to get bang on the percentage. As long as we're in the rough area or we're in the rough kind of number, then we will open up the marks. If you're not sure, then again, try to think about the phrasing that you might use so that you can still make your point, but not come in on a specific percentage, which might be wrong. Make sure that you read the question that is actually set for you. Lots of questions are similar, but you need to make sure you use the wording of the question that you have actually been given, because that sets the emphasis on how you should respond. Don't fall into the trap of using a pre-rehearsed essay, because that can cap you on marks if you're not linking the point or linking back to the question. Later on, we'll look at the breakdown of the marks, but remember, at higher level, we are looking to analyse, to evaluate, to discuss. So not all of your marks can be knowledge, can be description. There will be points where you'll be expected to do something with that. And the marks for knowledge are capped in order to get you to think about adding different layers to your answers. You might be practicing at home at the moment and you're not thinking about timing. That's okay. But at some point, we do have to think about putting timing in, because the SQA have asked us to include that in our sample. So on average for Higher Modern Studies, we are looking at 2 minutes per mark. So if you were doing a 12-mark essay, round about 24, 25 minutes. For a 20-mark essay, round about 40 minutes. It is important when you put the timing element in to try to be quite strict to that. If you spend too long on one essay and you run out of timing on the other, it really could cap you on the marks. And it might be that the extra time that you spent hasn't actually gained you many more marks for that one essay that you spent longer on. So just be mindful. So within Higher Modern Studies, there are 2 types of questions. There are 12-mark responses and 20-mark responses. There is a difference between the two. It's not just writing more because there are more marks available. If we look at a 12-mark response, first of all, you will be asked to evaluate or analyse. Those are the question stems. So that does imply that you have to look at more than one point. So for a 12-mark response, you would be looking for 3, possibly 4 points, depending on the size of the point that you make. We do have to build in knowledge, but you are capped at 8 for your knowledge, 8 out of 12. It is possible to have a makeup of other combinations. You could have 6 knowledge and 6 analysis. You can still get to the full 12 marks, but you have to make sure that you do have analysis in. So if you're providing a piece of knowledge, you have to comment on that. You have to make a judgment. You have to link it. You have to identify a trend. And that's the difference between National 5 and Higher. It's not straightforward knowledge. It's now adding that other layer and setting it in context. As we go throughout both of our responses, a really good way to help you do that is to use the point explanation example analysis structure. So a lot of you might be familiar with point explanation example if you did National 5 Modern Studies, and then we have to add our analysis on. As we move into our 20-mark responses, the analysis becomes really important. We're not looking to add more and more points on. Naturally, you probably will talk about more points because the stem of the question, discuss, to what extent, is opening up discussion between a number of factors, a number of points. Again, you are capped at 8 marks for knowledge so that you don't just describe your answer. You are commenting, you are doing something with it. And with a 20 marker, there is also the opportunity for you to pick up 2 marks for your structure. Most candidates do pick up the 2 marks. You're getting 1 mark for having answers to the question that has been set, and line of argument. And you're having the other mark for the content that you put down. Is it relevant? Is it accurate? Does it have a line of argument? So let's set up a task that will take us through different aspects of the question paper. I have put up some sample questions for each of the 3 sections: political, social, and international. On each section, there is a sample question and some narrative with some instructions on how to expand on the points so that you can access a question. At each section, that you study, pause the video, look at the instructions, and answer the task that has been set. I've also put in the QR code for the paper which the question has come from, so that if you wish to have that open up next to you, then you have that. Remember, at any point, you can come back, play the narrative again, listen to the instructions, and use that to help you move forward with your task. Okay, so if you are looking at the political section, regardless of whether you do democracy in Scotland or democracy in the UK, this is a common question. Analyse the influence of the media on voting behaviour. This question asks you to look at the influence of media. You can make reference to other factors that influence voting behaviour, but you have to link them to the media. This was a trap that some people fell into when this question appeared, because they had one paragraph on media and then they very quickly moved on to talk about age, social class, gender. In principle, these are influences on voting behaviour, but the question was analyse the influence of the media. So if you're going to talk about age and gender, you have to link the role of the media into them. For example, different age groups access different aspects of media, and talk about the changes that that can have on them. I've put some tasks in the box below. This will help you start to build your structure for your paragraphs and start to lead you towards your analysis, so that if you were to do the question afterwards, you have the main framework there. Pause the video now and complete the tasks. Okay, so another common question within the political topic: Parliament has had little success in holding the government to account. This is a 20-mark question, so obviously there's more opportunity for analysis. Remember, that's where the extra marks come. Make sure that you know the difference between Parliament and government. Government are the largest party who are in power. So currently that's SNP for the Scottish Parliament and the Conservatives for the UK Parliament. Parliament is all of the other parties, the opposition and the other parties against the government. What do they do in order to hold the government to account? We have the tasks in the box below. Pause the video, complete the tasks, and this will give you the baseline for being able to sample your structure for then having a shot at the question. Okay, social issues. So the question A is for social inequality. Question C is for crime and law. Both are very similar questions. Both are asking you to talk about the impact on one group. The group for social inequality will depend on what you have studied: women, people in poverty, ethnic minorities, elderly, children. Notice for the crime and law question, they have given you the group. Analyse the ways in which victims of crime are affected. So you can only talk about victims. In both questions, they have bolded up the instruction to make sure that you only talk about that one group. If you talk about more than one group, your marks will be capped. When you're ready, you can pause the video and complete the tasks for the topic that you study. This will give you the framework for the paragraphs and the knowledge and the analysis that you would need to then be able to have a shot at the question once you finish the task. Another common question within the social issues is that poverty is the main cause of poor health or the main cause of crime. Again, these are 20-mark questions, so we are looking towards some more analysis. Although poverty is the factor that is identified in the question stem discuss implies that you'd have to talk about more than one main cause. If you only talk about poverty, you will be capped. So make sure that you do have other factors that you can bring in, which are the main cause of poor health, that are the main cause of crime. Remember, the keyword Main cause. So as you're looking at poverty and other factors, you are starting to think about where they are in relation to each other. Is poverty the main cause of poor health or crime? Or are there other factors? Again, we're looking to make that judgment about whether it is the main cause or whether you think something else is the main cause. When you're ready, pause the video and complete the task for the topic that you study. This will give you a framework for being able to structure your response, and then you can set the timer to have a shot. The final section that we're moving on to is the international section. I've made separate questions depending on the topic that you study. So make sure you pause the video at the right section. The first slide is for schools that do world powers. So if you study China, for example, or USA, pause on the first slide. If you're looking at an issue, development in Africa, terrorism, then pause at slide 2. So if you are looking at a world power section, this is a sample question. This is quite a common question to come up because every world power has some form of government, which means it's a question that is accessible to everybody. Don't let the fact that the question doesn't mention your specific world power throw you, okay? It's always really handy if you get an opportunity to write the name of your world power at the top and then read the question back to yourself, and that sometimes helps it flow. There are limited opportunities for people to influence government decision-making in the USA. Discuss. There are limited opportunities for people to influence government decision-making in China. Discuss. You need to make sure that you do bring in examples from your world power throughout. Okay? Throwing the words China or USA in doesn't just count. So make sure you use the terminology president, branches of government, constitution, whatever those terminology for the world power you've studied is. Now just watch. If you do USA, this is not a branches of government question because the key word is opportunities for people. So thinking about the citizens of the people who live in a country. When you're ready, pause the video and complete the task for the world power that you study, and that will give you a framework for building up your essay, and then you can have a shot with the timing. Okay, if you do world issues as your international focus, this is a sample question. I've put this question in because this caused a little bit of confusion at the last exam, and I want to explain why. To what extent has the response by individual countries to this issue been effective? If your issue is terrorism or development in Africa, which are common issues, this asks you to think about the response that has been carried out by countries which are not the one in which the issue has occurred. So if you're looking at development in Africa, for example, and a lot of people were looking at countries like Malawi, in this case here, to what extent is the response by individual countries? It needs to be a country that's not Malawi. So the response by other individual countries. If you're looking at Syria, where they have felt the effect of conflict or felt the effect of terrorism, you cannot talk about the response by Syria. It's the response by other individual countries. That caught a lot of people out. They started writing a response that had been carried out by the country in which the event or the issue took place, and it capped them on the marks. So just be careful that you make sure that you're talking about other countries who have responded to your issue. When you're ready, pause the video and complete the task for the issue that you study. This will give you the framework to help you to be able to build your paragraphs and your points to be able to answer the question with the timing. So our next steps are to think about trying some of the questions within the timing. You might want to do it one at a time. You might want to set yourself a timer and go through all 3, whatever works for you. As another next step, I've put a task below. We want to build up your content, we want to build up your knowledge, and we want to help you be able to bring in some statistics and relevant examples that will contribute to your knowledge marks. So below, you see a number of emojis for each section. Try to look back through your notes and put an example to match each emoji. For example, the ballot box, you might want to put a voting turnout for a particular election. For example, for the USA on world powers, you might want to put down an election year and a president. Things that you can use perhaps across a number of different responses, but that are accurate and will help contribute to the development of your knowledge marks. The purpose of today was to help you build up your structure and your technique for extended responses. And this is a self-assessment grid that will help you build up where you're actually getting the marks. We have a split: knowledge marks, analysis and evaluation marks. You'll see on the screen that I have given a general overview of how we are awarding marks. In principle, we are looking for a knowledge mark to be for a point or an explanation that has some development on them, that is accurate and is relevant. You'll see an example. Smoking is the largest cause of lung cancer in the UK. It is accurate, but it's quite simplistic. It needs a little bit more. Smoking is the largest cause of lung cancer in the UK. Around 80% of lung cancer deaths are caused by smoking and contributes to secondhand smoking. It goes a little bit further. It starts to give a little bit of context. That whole point gets 1 mark. So when you are thinking about your responses, think about, am I going to get a mark for that? Using your point explanation example. Your point does have to have a little bit of development on it in order to get the mark. And if you follow that structure, you should be starting to hit around 3 or 4 marks per point, which will build you up to the 12 and the 20 marks. When it comes to your analysis and your evaluation, again, that will depend what you have put for your knowledge. The more you develop your knowledge, the more you've got scope to go with for judgment and further commentary. Analysis and evaluation is anything additional that adds a layer, that makes reference to the question, that allows you to compare, make a judgment, comment on significance. Again, smoking is clearly the strongest risk factor for lung cancer, but it often interacts with other factors which are linked to lifestyle choices and income. You can see there is an extension there, making a judgment about why people smoke, making a judgment about linking that into income groups. That counts as an analysis mark. So to review, we wanted to look at some of the key skills, the hints and tips that will help you develop your knowledge and your confidence. And we wanted to set up some structure to help you going about maximising your potential mark. How we were going to do that was that we were going to look at the structure for each section, and you were going to have a shot at a timed response using your notes to help you build up that framework. I hope that you have found today's session useful. Remember, at any point you can go back and listen to the instructions and the audio again. You've got access to the SQA papers and the marking instruction, and I wish you the best of luck.